Imagine coming home after a long day, making yourself a toasty, leaving the machine out for 1 hour to cool down, and your roommate loses her mind. Not because it was in her way, not because it was broken, not because it smelled, but because it was sitting on her worktop. A worktop in a shared kitchen that she does not own. That was the moment we realized we weren't just dealing with a difficult roommate. We were dealing with someone who had decided, quietly and unilaterally, that the rules of this house only applied to everyone else. So we made a decision of our own. If you've ever lived with someone who made you feel like a guest in your own home, someone who redrew the boundaries every single day until you were tiptoeing around your own kitchen, then this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and get comfortable. Because what happened next is one of the most beautifully petty, completely justified, and deeply satisfying pieces of revenge I've ever had the pleasure of narrating. Let's get into it. There's a specific kind of stress that comes with bad roommate situations. It's not like a fight with a friend where you can walk away and cool down. It's not like a conflict at work where you clock out and leave it behind. No. Bad roommate stress follows you home. It lives in the kitchen. It sits in the hallway. It greets you every single morning before you've had a chance to take a breath. And for our narrator, let's call her Jess, this had been the reality for months. Jess shared a house with 3 other people. 2 of them were fine, normal, the kind of housemates you nod at on the way to the bathroom and occasionally share a takeaway with. But the other 2? They were a different story entirely, and one of them, the one at the center of all of this, we'll call her Claire. Claire was the kind of person who smiled to your face and then sent you a passive-aggressive text message 10 minutes later. She was the kind of person who left notes on things, who used the word actually a lot, who had very strong opinions about very small things, and who had, over the course of the past several months, been slowly, methodically staking her claim over the shared spaces of the house. It started small, a come on here, a look there. A slightly too long pause before she moved her bag off the sofa when you needed to sit down. The kind of behavior that's hard to call out directly because each individual incident sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. She looked at me funny when I used the microwave. You know? It sounds petty, but the accumulation of it, the slow, grinding, daily accumulation of it, that is exhausting. And then came the worktop incident. Jess and her housemate, let's call her Mara, had been making toasties. Simple enough. They made their food, they sat down, they ate, and then they left the toasty maker on the counter to cool down. You can't put a hot appliance straight into a cupboard. That's just basic common sense. It had been out for maybe an hour. 1 hour. Claire came into the kitchen, saw the toasty maker sitting on the counter, and the temperature in the room dropped by about 15 degrees. Can you not leave things on my side? Jess blinked. Sorry, your side? And that's when Claire gestured, with the kind of authority usually reserved for property developers and medieval lords, to a specific section of the kitchen worktop, right next to the utensil holder. Prime kitchen real estate, by the way. The most convenient spot in the entire kitchen. And apparently, according to Claire's internal zoning laws, it belonged to her. Now, let's sit with this for a second. This is a rented house. A shared rented house. No one, not a single person in that building, owns so much as a square centimeter of that kitchen counter. The landlord owns it. The landlord, who is probably very unbothered about where Jess and Mara leave their toasty maker to cool. The idea that Claire had not only mentally subdivided the kitchen into personal territories, but expected everyone else to respect those territories without ever having a conversation about it, without ever getting any kind of agreement. It was so audacious that for a moment, Jess genuinely didn't know how to respond. She apologized. In the moment, she apologized. Because that's what you do when you're blindsided and you just want the tension to stop. And she moved the toasty maker. But something shifted in her that day. She went back to her room and talked to Mara. And they did what people do when they've been pushed just a little too far. They started connecting the dots. All the little moments, all the tiny power plays, all the times Claire had made them feel like they were in the wrong for simply existing in the shared spaces of their own home. And the picture that emerged was not pretty. Claire had appointed herself the silent manager of the household, and she had never, not once, been given that job. Jess and Mara sat with the injustice of it for a while. They thought about having a direct conversation. They thought about talking to the other housemates. They turned the options over in their heads. And then, slowly, a smile started to spread across Mara's face. "You know what's on her precious worktop?" Mara said. Jess looked up. "The kettle." Pause. The kettle. The kettle that Claire used every single morning. Multiple times a day, actually. The kettle that was as central to her daily routine as her alarm clock. The kettle that, and here's the beautiful part, belonged to Jess and Mara. They had bought it. It was theirs. They had simply, generously, left it in the kitchen for communal use. Right there on the worktop. On Claire's worktop. And in that moment, the plan was born. They didn't yell. They didn't confront. They didn't send a passive-aggressive group chat message. They just, very quietly, very calmly, started moving things. The kettle came first, carried back to their room with the kind of reverence usually reserved for priceless artifacts. Then the mugs, their mugs. Then the tea, the sugar, the little spoon they'd always kept in the kitchen. They made a trip to the shop and came back with a box of those tiny UHT milk portions, the little plastic ones you get in hotels. And then they set it all up. On the windowsill of their room, a neat, perfect little tea station. The kettle gleaming in the afternoon light, the mugs lined up like soldiers, the milk portions arranged in a small bowl, the sugar in a little pot with a lid. It looked, genuinely, like something you'd find in a boutique bed and breakfast. They stood back and looked at it. It was beautiful. The next morning, Jess woke up to the sound of the kettle. Except, wait, no she didn't, because the kettle was in her room. She made herself a tea without leaving her bed, didn't have to go to the kitchen, didn't have to navigate the minefield of shared space politics. Just kettle, mug, tea. Done. And meanwhile, downstairs, Claire walked into the kitchen. The kettle was gone. Now, here's where it gets good. Because what can Claire actually say? What is her move here? She can't complain that Jess and Mara took their own kettle back to their own room. She can't argue that they're being unreasonable, because the second she does, she has to acknowledge why they did it. And the reason they did it is because she threw a fit about her worktop. Every path Claire takes leads directly back to her own behavior. Every complaint exposes the absurdity of her original position. She was furious. That part was obvious. The energy in the house changed. There were looks. There were slightly louder than necessary cabinet closings. There was a certain rigidity to the way Claire moved through the kitchen when Jess happened to be nearby. But she said nothing. She couldn't say anything, because there was nothing to say that didn't make her sound completely unhinged. Jess, meanwhile, was back in her room. Feet up, fresh cup of tea steaming gently on the nightstand, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Here's the thing about petty revenge done right. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be dramatic or destructive or cruel. Sometimes, the most powerful response to someone who tries to control you is to simply stop giving them anything to control. Claire wanted ownership. She got it. An empty counter and no kettle. Be careful what you claim. Sometimes people will just let you have it. If this story gave you that deeply satisfying, they deserved it feeling. Smash that like button right now and drop a comment below. What's the pettiest, most justified revenge you've ever pulled off or witnessed? Because I have a feeling this community has some stories. Subscribe if you're new. We're just getting started, and I'll see you in the next one.